Hello and a warm welcome to everyone viewing this recording. In this session, we're excited to be exploring how to make the Level 5 Diploma in Teaching, FE and Skills, come to life by discussing and evaluating the interesting challenges and opportunities it will bring. We'd like to explore how NCFE can support teachers and lecturers to engage trainee teachers in the qualification by creating and providing teaching, learning and assessment activities which will motivate new and existing trainee teachers to innovate, engage their learners using a variety of approaches, whilst also reviewing best practice and of course striving for excellence. So a little bit about us. My name is Helen Scanlon and I'm part of NCFE's provider development team. I have a background of teaching vocational subjects, have worked in private and charitable educational providers, as well as secondary FE and HE. I'm an English and maths specialist, was a teacher trainer for 14 years, and have also worked in a quality improvement role, participating in formal Ofsted inspections. I've been with NCFE for nearly 5 years, and I support teachers and assessors to develop and share best practice and get the best possible outcomes for their learners. I've got a master's in education and professional development and like nothing more than sharing my experiences in education of over 30 years.
Hi, my name's Janet King. I'm the Sector Manager for Education and Early Years here at NCFE. My background is in industry, many years in industry, and also working in teaching, lecturing in FE and HE, as well as management roles. And it's wonderful to be part of the webinar and to work on this qualification in particular, which is very close to all of our hearts today.
Hello, my name is Alison Chatton and I'm one of the product managers here at NCFE. My role is all about driving the continuous improvement and development of our qualifications and our wider product offer by understanding market requirements and what our customers really need. So I'm really excited to be here and explore how we can better support teachers and lecturers to make the most of this new qualification.
Okay, so the outcomes for this session can be seen on the screen now. We're in the planning stages of our support offer for this exciting new qualification and would really like the input of the teachers and assessors who will be involved in its delivery to tell us what they would like us to do. There will be a link to a feedback form at the end of this recording. We'll also share a QR code and that link to allow you to let us know how you'd like us to make the qualification come to life. We've looked at the qual spec, assessment methodology, the core and optional units, and used our experiences and feedback gained from working with teachers and assessors to create a variety of topics and activities that we could offer. But we need your help to share our support offer by telling us, to shape our support offer by telling us where areas of need are and let us know what you'd like us to focus on in the coming months. So we're going to share our ideas that we have in terms of the challenges the new qualification could bring and the opportunities for developing and sharing best practice. We're going to explain our CPD ideas to allow you to let us know which of them you'll find most useful.
We'd also really like your feedback on how useful you might find additional activities such as drop-in clinics or best practice networks. And we'll explain what they are and what we mean by them at NCFE. So if you would please listen to these discussions and our explanations, and we hope to provide sufficient information to let you evaluate how useful they would be for you. The feedback form at the end will be asking you to rate each of our CPD ideas on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being low and 10 being high. So as we run through each one, please can you evaluate their worth and give them a score that you can use on the feedback form. So you might find it useful to have a pen and paper or a digital document open to make your notes and just pause the recording when needed.
Okay, so let's get into the detail. On the screen now, you can see the list of topics we've identified that might be of use. We're going to discuss each of them in more detail, and you can see that there will be also the opportunity to identify any topics or areas that we may have missed. Let's pause just for a moment to allow you to absorb the list before we get into explaining what we mean by each topic area. Janet, is there anything in particular you'd like to say about how we've created this list?
I think when we created this list, we were thinking from our own experiences as well, both as being a trainee teacher and also when supporting and mentoring teachers in the position where they were training to be vocational teachers as well. So I think this really gives an idea of, you know, if you've got lots and lots of industry experience and you're coming over to teaching, what sorts of things might be relatively new for students? What sorts of things would be really useful? And I think we both said, didn't we, that the sector insight and a day in the life of would be really, really supportive and interesting for just to open that insight up really into what it's like to work in this sector.
Absolutely, yes, Janet. And when I started off life as a vocational teacher and then obviously a trainee teacher, that would have been so insightful. So these are the ideas that we have pulled together in discussion using experience and insight to see how useful it would be in terms of CPD sessions that NCFE could create, put on and provide for the teachers of this qualification. So that's the purpose of looking through these areas today. So it would make sense to start with the core units. On the table, knowledge-only units are indicated by a star. So if a unit is not marked with a star, it is a skills unit or contains a mix of knowledge and skills. A summary of the content of the core units are shown on the screen now. We're not going to run through each of them or all of them, but we would like to pull out what we think the important points could be. Janet, can I ask you to share your thoughts first, please?
Absolutely, thanks, Helen. So when we look at the core unit 1 there, we're really getting to grips with those, the aims, the structure, curriculum design, what qualifications or subject area will be your specialist area, and really trying to understand the sector that you'll be working in as a teacher. And then, of course, thinking about the role that you'll play in Unit 2 and the diversity and the range of student profiles that you're likely to be exposed to in FE. And that takes us as well into those roles when you're actually doing the teaching, the responsibilities, the professional boundaries, and so on. One unit that really stands out to us is Unit 4, the professional practice portfolio. And that is one where the trainee teacher will be really, if you like, providing the evidence that they're able to apply the knowledge that they're gaining in the core units to their actual practice. So Unit 4 is, for me, a kind of wraparound or longitudinal unit that will really help the students to make sense of what they're doing and what they're learning, and to be able to apply that with supervision, with mentoring, of course, in place, but apply it to their increasing confidence and competence. Thanks, Helen.
Thanks. Brilliant, Janet. And that Unit 5 at the bottom there, this is the first time in my experience that we've seen acknowledgement of using technology to motivate remote and blended approaches. So it's a question we get asked quite regularly, you know, how do you engage and motivate learners using online platforms? That is new, and it's the new world, isn't it? So some really interesting and meaty units there with some excellent ideas for coverage. And as the English and Maths specialist that I pride myself in being, bringing English and Maths into vocational areas is also very, very useful to the students. Seeing the application of English, Maths and digital in their everyday life and in that vocational area is really important. And not all vocational technical teachers are confident in doing that, so supporting that as well would be something that I would really enjoy and I think teachers would find useful. Okay, so we're going to move on to the optional units now and do the same. And again, in this table, the knowledge only units have the star, and where they're not marked with a star, they are the skills units or contain a mixture of knowledge and skills. So apologies for the amount of text here, but we've done the same in terms of summarising the content of the 7 optional units. Okay, Janet, let's explore our important points as we did for the core, please.
Absolutely. So let's just remember that the students are doing 90 credits over those core units that we've just looked at, and they're now making up another 30 credits from the optional units that we can see here on this slide. Now, you may look at your own expertise and your own subject knowledge within your staff team to be able to, best fit the optional unit profile, and that might be something that you give sort of due diligence to in terms of how are we going to support the students. But you have got a range there. So there are 7 optional units. So we've got the action research, we've got looking at resources and their purpose. So we've also got action research, which I've gone to because it excites me. We've got the role of the personal tutor, so that's also interesting. Action learning, fantastic. A specialist area of disability, so looking at SEND. Maybe looking at quality assurance and the principles of internal and external quality assurance is something that the student teacher is going to be or is already involved in. And that diversity again, so thinking about English as an additional language and how that can be best supported. So there are 3. I'd want to be doing all of them because they all look so wonderful. But you'd be thinking about, okay, what optional units are going to best fit the cohort of students or the student that I'm going to be supporting and working with, and think about your own expertise and how that can best be blended into the core units, because that's also a possibility, and how the expertise can best be matched to the needs of that trainee teacher and the cohorts that they'll be teaching and delivering as they move forward with you.
Totally agree. And as well, those action learning modules really excite me as well. The essence of applying theory to practice is really important here, and having an action learning activity to look at something particular would be really interesting to do. So, and then of course resources, the effectiveness and principles of the design, how to use them to formatively assess, how to use them in a teaching context, how to use emerging technologies effectively, use, across a range of specialist areas. I think one of the challenges would be if the class of trainee teachers comes from a wide range of vocational areas or technical areas, there'll be different approaches and resources used in those different areas. So pulling apart that would really interest and excite me as a teacher trainer. So there's lots there that we could get our teeth into in terms of supporting the teachers who are delivering this qualification and assessing it, and designing the curriculum to really engage and innovate and motivate the trainee teachers they're working with. Okay, moving on to vocational and technical learning, teaching and assessment. If we were to create and offer a CPD session or activities based on this topic, what would we do and what do we mean by it? Can you please consider how beneficial you might find this using that scale of 1 to 10, and what we mean by this title is shown now. Okay, Janet, pull up out 1 or 2 just to explain in more detail, please.
Absolutely. So I'm going to pick the diverse needs of the student profile and progression into the industry transfer. I'm going to pick 3. I'm being very greedy here. So progression into the industry and how that sort of links with transferring those skills from industry to teaching. Those are the things that really stand out to me and have been of kind of important aspects when I've been involved in teaching this sort of qualification before. So
Yeah.
the diverse needs of the student profile is so important, Helen, isn't it? And
yeah,
absolutely appreciating the needs, being student centered, having that background knowledge, making sure you're having the right conversations, and that the teacher knows what they need to know to be able to plan in an efficient and effective way. And then transferring skills from industry and that progression, well, progression in the industry, because you're gaining those skills and knowledge, and it's a two-way transferable thing, this, I feel. But when we're coming from industry into teaching, and just how do we apply all of that knowledge and all of that wealth of experience into the world of teaching and learning is also a learning experience for the trainee teachers in themselves, I think.
Agreed.
But,
And I'm going to pull apart telling, teaching and learning and the ping pong ball. From my experience, when I first started teaching in a vocational area, I used to think to myself, what do I need to tell the students? What do I need to tell the students? I need to tell them to do X, Y, and Z. But telling them doesn't necessarily mean it'll stick. And teaching them, how am I going to teach them this? Still doesn't resonate until I say, how are the students going to learn this? And so pulling apart what the difference is yes, there'll be times when teachers need to tell. There'll be times when teachers need to teach, but all the time the learners need to be learning. So it's a focus on learning rather than telling and teaching. And then when I first became a vocational teacher, I found that I was in a context where students were doing practical work and practicing practical skills. And when you've got more than one person that you're working with in that context, you become a ping pong ball around that classroom or around that vocational setting. And it's a case of having strategies that mean that the teacher does not have to be that ping pong ball. If it's a construction site or a construction working area, the teacher is bouncing around all of the learners working on the vocational skills and competencies. What can the teacher do to stop being that ping pong ball? And that's kind of what I meant by the ping pong ball analogy. Janet, does that make sense to you?
it makes absolute sense. Yeah, absolutely. And the importance, what comes out of that, what you've just said as well, Helen, I think, is that the importance of that relationship, that professional relationship that grows between the mentor, supervisor, tutor, and the trainee teacher, and the trust that builds there, and how it becomes that sort of how you listen, really, and how you learn about each other, and that helps, I think, in that teaching and learning environment. So yeah, some great advice there.
Lovely. So moving on to our next idea, and that's about how trainee teachers can develop their pedagogical practice and then allow that to filter down into their students as well, because we've got that focus on metacognition. So again, please consider how useful you'll find this, and do the same for each of the following areas using that 1 to 10 scale that Alison mentioned earlier. So what we mean by this should be able to be seen on the screen now. Janet, we've talked about knowing your learners and peer learning supports coming in here. Is anything that's leaping out to you in our list for this one?
I think, well, we've talked about motivation, haven't we? And I think scaffolding and modelling, a lot of these things have come quite naturally and incidentally from what we've been discussing already, but the importance of that love of learning and that ability to reflect, I think we're talking here about that scaffolding, modelling, making things stick. So the importance of actually reflecting on that and having that positive mindset is so important, I think, not just for the trainee teacher, but also for the trainee teacher to be able to apply that sort of pedagogy in their own practice as well. Yeah. So they're taking responsibility for their own learning, but they're also trying to motivate and instill that in others, aren't they?
Trying to model it. And I love the term that you used, that you added to this list, was about independent mastery. So building teachers' confidence to master the skills of pedagogical practice and how it all works. And then moving into motivation and tenacity. If things don't work, how to keep your motivation going, how to keep at it, and really using different approaches if things don't work. It's okay if a student doesn't respond as you'd like them to an activity. So how can you keep that motivation up? How can you keep that motivation going and changing what you do in a professional and reflective way, which we'll talk about further, because I think they do come into to other areas as well. Okay, let's move on to the next area then. And this next topic relates to teachers developing their professional practice. That does include SEND, working with learners with specific educational needs, inclusion, and of course safeguarding. So the ideas that we came up under this title with are shown on the screen now. Back to that awareness of the learner needs, professionalism and boundaries, liaison with other professionals. Janet, anything from yourself that you'd like to add, please?
I think this also sort of continues that theme, that thought that's been going through our discussions in the webinar so far, Helen, in terms of really appreciating the needs of all the students and that student profile that can be quite diverse in the world of FE. And I think, you know, understanding that this is a natural part sometimes of somebody's journey from industry into teaching and bringing that into teaching, and the importance therefore of that developing professional practice to take on board all of the learning around all of those aspects that are listed there. So I think it's just an appreciation and a celebration of diversity, and making sure that the resources, the teaching and learning, the pedagogy, everything that's going into the teaching and learning environment, it's student-centered, and that can really be supported by obviously tuning in to the students and getting to know those students really well, but also the liaison with others and working with other professionals. So yeah, again, I'd say some really good highlights of what this area is all about are listed there for further thoughts.
Absolutely, and just nipping back to the differentiation side of things, we can plan for differentiated activities, but we can also be adaptable in a classroom and have ad hoc support or extension activities, and that's useful to actually talk about with trainee teachers and teachers in practice, in terms of, yes, you had planned that because you thought that might happen, it didn't happen, so what might you do if it doesn't happen? And even having that awareness that you can change in real time in a lesson. Just because it's on the lesson plan doesn't mean you have to stick with it if it's not working. Having that confidence to have the flexibility and develop and practice. So a really interesting area that we could talk about probably all day. But let's move on to the next one. Our next CPD topic is based on your own curriculum planning for the qualification. So how useful might you find these areas? And the detail of the possible CPD support and activities for this is shown now. But before we get into that, I'm just going to share a Venn diagram that I came up with in a teacher training, but also quality improvement role, in terms of what does an effective teacher draw from to be effective. And in this diagram, the A is the subject skills and knowledge. So the knowledge of the skills of the industry that they're worked in, that they're going to be teaching in, or they're already teaching in. So their own skills and knowledge that they're bringing to the party, if you like, the teaching toolkit. B in this Venn diagram is the pedagogical or the teaching skills, the science of actual teaching and learning. And that's what this qualification is all about. It's about how to use everything from the Venn diagram part A in a teaching context. How do you teach it? How do the learners learn it? How do you assess progress? How do you assess starting points and ending points and progress across the program or even individual session? So we've got A is the teaching, A is the subject specialist knowledge, B is the teaching skills and knowledge. And in this diagram, my little world has C as the emotional intelligence of the person, the personality, how they engage with others, how they interact with other people, how they make things sound interesting when they're talking about it. It's not just you would say this, it's how do you say this to engage learners, to motivate them, to enthuse them to want to learn more, to support them to be confident in their own skills, knowledge and abilities. So that's all about your personality and your social skills and how you use them to engage. And when those three areas overlap, my experience has shown that that's when most effective teaching takes place. So moving back to curriculum planning, how can we have in our minds as teacher trainers how to encourage and develop use of the subject skills and knowledge, use of the teaching and learning pedagogies and the science of teaching and learning and assessment, and their own personalities and how they can use those three areas effectively together to actually be an effective teaching. Janet, I'm going to come back to you for our list, please.
Okay, wonderful. So I think what I'll do is just take all of that and apply it back to the specification, and in particular how Unit 4 and that professional practice portfolio is built and what it requires of your students. So the world that Helen has just been describing is one that's going to be very familiar to you and may not be familiar at all to your students. So it's taking time to actually and the specification will do this, but taking time to think about what's a scheme of work, how do we develop a long-term plan, how do we then break that down into objectives, and really taking them through the mechanics, if you like. I think, Helen, you talked about the science of the teaching, but taking those trainee teachers through the science of that, what will help them, what tools do they need to be able to help them and support them, and just to spend some time doing that. And Unit 4, that professional practice portfolio, does allow for that kind of, where it's possible, that sort of staged approach to the teaching, so that they are learning about those mechanics, they're learning about the pedagogy, they're learning about how they can apply all of that knowledge, and they're doing that by shadowing, by doing some sort of peer-to-peer micro teaches. They're then shadowing, they are then building up that independent mastery that we talked about earlier, and they're teaching independently. So in this element here, I think it's about, okay, this is the world, this is my world, I understand all of this. How can I then help the trainee student to become not just exposed, but emerged into this in a way that will help them to see this as a useful tool and as something that they can actually have in their tool bag of pedagogy for increased confidence and competence as well.
Agreed. Thanks, thanks, Janet. Okay. The next topic area that we've created relates to preparing your trainee teachers for assessment. And this would be related to initial, formative and summative assessment activities. And what we think we would cover can be shown now. I'm just going to dive to the bottom one first of all, because we're all human beings, and the Dunning-Kruger effect makes reference to awareness of levels of competency and knowledge. If the professional themselves deems that their skills and knowledge are really high, when in actual fact they're not so high, and they're not aware of their effectiveness or levels of skills, knowledge and effectiveness, that would be called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And in many years of teacher training, we do have teachers who think they're better than they are and actually think they're worse than they are and they're much better than they are. So it's supervision of those teachers that would come into play there. Janet, I'm going to come back to you now for your ideas on any of these areas, please.
Thank you. Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head with the importance of supervision, because I think it's the one thing that is critical to that positive relationship, to that building confidence, to that, being able to then talk in a constructive way, to plan for improvements to practice, and to have very open and honest conversations when things go wrong, because things go wrong across the board in teaching, don't they? No matter what you plan for, you don't know what's going on, and what's going to what you're actually going to walk into, and things can change within one session. So having those very open and honest conversations, and then the importance of supervision, reflection, mentoring, all of these things help to develop that open and honest conversation in a safe space that we talk about here, that hopefully the trainee teacher will be able to take forward. And I think if a trainee teacher can be involved in some shadowing, you know, before they are exposed to teaching independently, or alongside, if that's the case, but it would really help, I think, to see how experienced teachers actually, things go wrong. What are the strategies that they use? What, you know, oh, the lesson plan's gone off on a tangent. Why did that happen? Oh, it didn't matter, and this is how the teacher dealt with it. And I think those things help just to raise that confidence, and again to open up those conversations, and that open and honest reflection of, well, that lesson didn't go well for me, let's have a think about how we could make things better. What did you think? And having that two-way conversation really helps, I think.
Agreed. And something you touched on there in terms of feedback. This is where you're at. This is what I saw. This is what skills and knowledge and competencies you've shown in whatever that assessment was. But what's more important is that feed forward. So moving forward from here, helping the trainee teachers to reflect on what they've learned from in that safe space, and using it to continue to develop the practice in future activities, but also carrying out research and having evidence-based practice is really important and useful. And as a trainee teacher in a technical or vocational area, I know I didn't have a lot of research knowledge or experience when I first came to teacher training. So introducing that sometimes to teachers professionals who've never done it before, and why evidence-based practice is so important. So there's lots of stuff in there that we could spend a whole year working on, but it's some really interesting ideas if you guys listening to this would find it useful to yourselves. Okay, the next one, our favourite one, Janet, the sector insight. And I think this next idea would have been really useful when I started my teacher training journey. Some insight into the sector and a day in the life of the employment that I was looking and hoping to move into. So what kind of things do we think this covers? Janet, I'm going to hand straight to yourself, and I'll come back to the quality assurance one if that's okay.
Absolutely. Okay. So as we were just talking, reflection in and on action, I think, is so important. Things will go wrong, and it's okay. Key thing, don't panic. Let's just have a look at where we're going. Let's bring things back. Let's manage the situation as it is. I don't think anybody would argue with the fact that the session plan is a flexible, agile piece of work, just like any planning, and it's there to help to keep a sort of focus on objectives, and to make sure that in the wider scope of things, we're teaching the subject that needs to be taught, because it's going to be something that the student needs for their future career assessment and so on. But being able to reflect in and on action is so important. Having those realistic expectations of yourself as well as of the students that you're working with. Again, being mindful of the people that you're working with, the students that you're working with. Being ambitious with what you want to do, and creative and innovative with what you want to do in terms of the resources that you have, but being reflective all the time, keeping your expectations managed, and being flexible and adaptable in your day-to-day teaching. Very, very important. There will be times, we've touched on safeguarding as one of the sort of areas for exploration during the session today, and there will be times when a student may confide in you, may obviously need some support, that again, you need to be mindful of what you can do and your professional boundaries as a trainee teacher. So making sure that that trainee teacher knows what the support services are within your organisation, and how and who to go to, what the processes are if there is any aspect of disclosure, or your concerns if the student is concerned about one of the students. The importance of monitoring attendance, and the impact that has, not just for student welfare, which is the #1 priority here, but also for the bigger picture of retention and achievement, and how that is maintained through record keeping. And then I'm leaving yours, Helen, and then the administration side of things, the preparing, the marking, the recording, the assessing, all of the information that's part and parcel that lives outside of that classroom often. And I think that's sort of the flavour of what somebody needs to know. You're doing this, there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of preparation, there's a lot of doing in the classroom where you're making that absolute difference. And then there's a lot of recording, and this cycle continues in the life of a vocational technical teacher, as does quality assurance, Helen.
Thank you, Janet. And I was talking to a fellow teacher trainer recently about the admin side of things, and we did have a chuckle at how it would have been good to have a heads up, and that sector insight, the day in the life of a teacher, would absolutely cover administration and all the record keeping that is needed to track learner progress and learner support needs. And the quality assurance side of things is quite often hard to get heads around when you're new to quality assurance. What is assessing against criteria? What is internal quality assurance? What kind of activities take place in internal quality assurance, and external quality assurance as well? What happens there? What are the processes? What are the requirements? What's the regulations? What are the policies and procedures that we must follow as we sign off these students as being competent and have the expected skills and knowledge at that level? What does that mean? I used to be involved in delivery of TAQA in the old A1 and V1 units, so assessing and verification quals. And I used to say any assessor, anyone involved in any quality assurance makes them the guardian of those standards. We can't as professionals sign people off on things if they're not 100% competent. So we are that guardian. So it's a big part of a technical vocational teacher's role and assessment is to ensure that anything that's signed off qualification wise must adhere to quality assurance guidelines. So there's lots of activities within there that I would have really benefited knowing about entering the sector. Okay, working with others, and this absolutely comes from our experience in teacher education, the challenges and opportunities of having pre-service and in-service teachers that we are teaching, because we know that people start teaching not necessarily having any teacher training qualifications or knowledge. And you don't just wake up one day and become, know what to do and how to teach. So what we meant by working with others, as in you have pre-service and in-service teachers quite often in the same room, is shown on the screen now. So Janet, I'm going to hand over to yourself again, please.
Thank you. And I think just as we were talking about the importance of that trainee teacher building that professional rapport with his or her students that they're going to be working with, equally is the importance of acknowledging and appreciating that experience, as Helen was talking about there, in the teachers that are coming to you. Are they coming to you to be able to, are they working full-time or part-time? Are they already in service teaching with you, so they will have a degree of confidence with the staff team, with the routines, etc. For others, they might be coming part-time. This might be a totally new immersion that they're coming into, and that can be difficult, and they might need to spend a little bit more time sort of shadowing and getting to know. Some will feel more confident than others. Some may feel a lack of confidence. I can remember working with somebody and thinking, oh no, he's going to get eaten alive. And, you know, then went into the classroom and I was just blown away. The confidence, the rapport, the natural ability. So I think, you know, we mustn't jump to any conclusions here, but at the same time, I think appreciating the experience and the confidence levels, but not to jump to conclusions till you've seen them in action would be my lesson learned there.
Absolutely. And we did talk about subject knowledge and currency as well, because when people have been in an industry teaching it for a while, how do they keep their subject knowledge current? And what do they do to do that? How can we acknowledge that people who are still in the industry, what they bring? Lots of stuff that we could talk about and pull apart there as well. Okay.
Absolutely.
This last area relates to the mechanics of teaching. We've been talking about this already, including a review of the different approaches and how teachers can use them effectively. And our detail in terms of what we mean by this can be seen on the screen now. I think my favourite one on this one is the starting points of learners. Every learner, no matter how old they are, will have a different starting point. They'll have different starting levels of knowledge, skills, competency, awareness, and some of that could be right and some of it could not be right, but we need to know what the starting point is so that we can build an effective learning program from there. It's not one size fits all. We do have to be adaptable and we really have to know the learners. Janet, I'm going to hand to you now before I talk about this forever.
Okay, I think we could both talk to this subject for quite a long time, but I think what we've got on here are things that we've touched upon already, and I think it's just that importance of modeling, because this is about things on here are indicators of good practice in the teaching and learning environment, and I think if these are modeled by the teachers who are working with the trainee teachers, then absolutely these things are going to become important to them as well. So the criticalness of effective mentoring, I think, is so important here, and doing that through a trusting, professional and positive mindset so that that confidence is increasing rather than the fear emerging.
Absolutely, and I'm just going to dive in and say, can everybody see the American spelling that's snuck into that bottom one? But we'll not worry about it. That would be something that we could say, can anyone spot a deliberate mistake there? But anyway, thank you. I'm going to hand over to Alison for this next bit.
Well, thank you so much, Helen and Janet. I think your passion and enthusiasm absolutely comes through in spades, and I hope that anybody watching this is as excited about the opportunities around delivering this qualification. So we've come to the end of our ideas now. So now it's over to you, the audience, to let us know what we've missed. What you'd like us to consider adding to our CPD and support offer in terms of content, and any other feedback on how often you'd like to have sessions. And this is really your opportunity to inform and shape NCFE's support offer. So if you'd like to just please pause here and consider any additional topics or areas that you feel would help you make this qualification really come to life.
Thanks, Alison. That's great. We really do want to hear what your thoughts are and what you would like to have that will support you. Okay, so I want to move on now to the other support activities which we offer to teachers and assessors of targeted qualifications, and these are a little bit wider than the qualifications we've talked, or the qualification that we've focused on today. So these include functional skills, T-levels, and VCerts, vocational certificates. If you're involved in the teaching and or assessment of these NCFE qualifications, you might have experience of them. If not, your colleagues might have. You might know somebody who's teaching this within your organisation. And on here we've got a list of some of the things that happen in a drop-in clinic, and this is something that of course could be applied to the qualification that we're talking about today as well. So a drop-in clinic is for you. It's absolutely for you. It's very informal. No question is a silly question. You know, as we all do, that if you've got that question in your head, somebody else is thinking about that as well. So it's about sharing concerns, ideas, having that informal networking opportunity and feeling that your voice is being heard, so we can try and find out answers for you and get the support that you need and bring that back. So the drop-in clinic is somewhere where you can, oh, I wish I could ask somebody about this, or this has just happened, is this going to be okay? And you can bring all of those thoughts and issues and ideas to share in drop-in clinics. We also have best practice networks. In functional skills, we refer to these as teach, share, and transform networks. So I think on here, again, we'd like to know what you would like to see in best practice networks, but they are practitioner-led. It's an opportunity, as it says on here, to share top tips between each other or with each other. Thinking together about information sharing, what worked, why didn't it work, what did you do, how can we learn from each other to showcase and spotlight certain tricky areas perhaps. And of course it will involve some informal standardization discussions in terms of, is this okay, we did this. So again, an opportunity to share and to showcase what we do. I'm going to hand over to Alison now just to bring this session to a close.
Okay, so we've reached the end of this session now, and it's our chance to say thank you so much for watching. We really hope it's provided you with sufficient information and detail to allow you to provide some feedback relating to which support you'd like us to offer and which CPD topics and areas you'd like us to prioritise. So on screen here, you can see a QR code which you can scan to access our form, where you can rate the ideas Helen and Janet have talked through, scoring them on that scale of 1 to 10. There's also a link type of just below that if you can't scan the code. And for more information, there's a link there also to the qualification page on the NCFE website, where you will find the qual spec and 2 previous recordings that discuss the qualification and delivery in a little bit more detail. My email address is also noted there, so please feel free to get in touch with any questions or further feedback or details of how to register to deliver the qualification, and I'll connect you with the right people. Thank you very much once again, and have a lovely day.